Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another powerful episode of The Lion's Den. I'm your host, Venezia Leone, and today I sat down with Dr. Hassan Tetteh, a heart and lung transplant surgeon, Navy veteran of 25 years, entrepreneur, and AI innovator in healthcare. Hassan's story begins in Brooklyn as the son of immigrant parents and evolves into a career spanning military deployments around the world, life-saving transplant surgery, and the founding of STAR Teams, a surgical services company that was ultimately acquired. In this episode, we talk about leadership under pressure, how mission-driven teams outperform hierarchy, and what it really takes to innovate in one of the most regulated industries in the world. We also dive into the realities of scaling, acquisition lessons, and why entrepreneurs have to learn to embrace problems instead of fearing them. It's a powerful conversation about purpose, resilience, and building systems that truly save lives. Hope you all enjoy. Hi, Dr. Tetteh. So excited to have you on the Lion's Den today.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind invitation, Venezia. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I love it. So you have a very interesting background spanning, military, healthcare, business, all of these things. What moments, I kind of want to start at the beginning about your early career. Like, what moments helped shape how you think about leadership under pressure?
Oh, that's a very good question. There's a long answer to that potentially, but starting at the beginning,
We got time.
I always like to start with my very, very beginning, which is growing up in a little town in New York called Brooklyn. Many have heard of it. New York's small little village town of Brooklyn was really where it all began for me. My parents were immigrants. I was made in the USA, as my dad liked to say, and I think many immigrant parents can attest to this. And certainly, if you're a child of immigrant parents, you know that they want you to be either a doctor or a lawyer, and that's kind of like those are like the two things. So those very early beginnings really shaped my perspective to in many ways, because I wanted to be an artist actually, but I knew that my parents probably would frown upon that, even though I thought I was quite talented as an artist. So I wanted to go into healthcare. My mom was a nurse's aide, so I had that perspective. And then just growing up, I had exposure very early on to some consequential characters that were physicians that were very inspirational, I should say. And I just wanted to be like them because they seemed to help people. They sort of carried this reverence, and it all looked very endearing to me. And I said, this will be a great thing to pursue. And it really started from there. And I was fortunate to have a lot of good support along the way. And I think that's kind of really where it started from. Now, for me, one of the things that shaped my leadership perspective quite a bit was my military experience. And as you mentioned, that I served for 25 years in the Navy. It was.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was not the original plan to spend so long in the military. I thought I would just do a few years and get out, but it turned out to be quite consequential for me, and also, as I mentioned, really shaped a lot of who I am today because of the experiences I had being a part of a much larger mission, I would say, than just healthcare, and being deployed all over the world and having exposure to so much in such a short period of time during my very formative years of life. I've been to over 50 countries as a consequence of serving in the military, and also getting exposed to places where on my time off, those rare times when I did, I said, hey, I'd like to go back to that area or region of the world and explore it further. And as you can imagine, when you get to travel so much, especially coming from a little town in New York, as diverse as it is, you get to really experience, and I think get exposed to a great myriad of different perspectives that all contribute to this mosaic of my career, as well as my perspective and how I sort of look at the world.
Absolutely. I remember reading a statistic. I'm in New York City now, and it's like, the amount of languages that are spoken in one borough is like 83 or something like that. Like, it's just the most diverse.
Yeah. So I like to joke around and say, when I start talking too much, my Brooklynese will come out.
I've heard it. I have heard a couple words here and there. So obviously at some point, because we like to interview entrepreneurs, you got into the business side of healthcare.
Yeah.
So when did that kind of click for you, where you realized, okay, the impact I'm having as a surgeon is tremendous, but now I want to think about systems and strategy and innovation in like a different way. Talk about maybe that inflection point and kind of maybe where you got the ideas for some of your initiatives and
Yeah,
products.
absolutely. I think it goes back to those early days that I spoke of. At least for me, growing up in the 1980s and late 80s and 90s in New York City, we as sort of young folks were very industrious. So I think my sort of hustle from New York really started then. My parents did not have a lot, so if I wanted nice sneakers or clothes or anything that was, anything that was pricey, my only opportunity to do that was to work. And so from a very early age, I was very industrious. I got my first job as a teenager and have been working ever since in many ways. So my entrepreneurial drive, I think, was started very early on. And what I recognize and realize is that, this country gives folks that are willing to work a lot of opportunities. You can do a lot, even if it's a day job, you can always be looking at what the next opportunity was. So I held jobs at McDonald's and fast food restaurant, you name it, Target, taking carts and wheeling them back into the store.
Yeah.
And all these jobs and being a messenger in New York City in particular, there was always this exposure that I had to what was the art of the possible. And I remember vividly being a messenger in New York City in my early teenage years as a high school student, going into these massively lavish buildings, and just delivering packages back then and thinking to myself, wow, what do these people do for a living? This is just incredible. You could just sense that there were very successful people here. And I think that's really what engendered that, my entrepreneurial spirit from the very beginning. It was just the New York mentality of you can always do more. There's always an opportunity to bring value. There's always an opportunity to be compensated for something if you can do it well. And certainly that carried into my medical career, as you mentioned, and has been woven into my DNA ever since. And I think that it is one of the reasons why my parents in particular, and my mom, really always emphasized and stressed that her belief was that this particular country, unlike where she came from in West Africa, was one of these places where there was a tremendous amount of opportunity. As long as you had a good idea, you're willing to work hard. And I don't want to sound Pollyannish about it, because many have said, "Oh, this so-called American dream is fleeting." But I think representative of that in many ways, because there are very few countries where someone that comes from a particular background can, one, become a surgeon, two, become a business owner, three, serve in the military, and do all of these things while pursuing entrepreneurial pursuits. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why I was so and am so proud to have served in the military, because I think our military preserves a lot of that aspect of our country that makes it so unique and so special.
Yeah, it's a very interesting like comparison that you have of these spaces. Like in my mind, the healthcare space is one of the hardest spaces to exist in. The military is one of the hardest spaces to exist in. Entrepreneurship is one of the, like, truly you have picked the three most difficult, like really spaces to carve out your niche and to create value and to challenge the barriers and the structures and the systems. And it's really just unique, in my opinion, that you've really spent decent time in all three, and you've been able to make a difference in all three. What do you think there's any like maybe let's start with healthcare. In my mind, being entrepreneurial in that space is very difficult because it's very regulated and it's very life or death and all of these things. So as you innovated in that space,
like what are some of the things that are maybe uniquely difficult to building in that space, a healthcare versus the other spaces you've kind of built in?
Yeah, sure. Very good question. I think anyone that has dabbled in tech and tried to put that, new innovation solution into healthcare, not coming from a healthcare background, or even if you do come from a healthcare background, will realize immediately, oh my goodness, there is so much red tape. There's so much regulation. There's so much resistance to change.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I approached it in that way. I think what has always been my motivating force and factor has been, how can I make this situation better that currently exists in a way that is actually not ideal? And so you alluded to doing it in healthcare, and it was a very practical idea and concept that came into my idea, while taking, as you mentioned, these other experiences and sort of bridging them. And I like to think that one of the major attributes of being an entrepreneur is making connections, literally and figuratively, right? Anyone that's been an entrepreneur knows you have to network a lot. You have to meet people. You have to, whether it's fundraising, whether it's trying to find and seek talent, whether it's trying to find and seek clients, you have to always be making connections. You always have to start seeing how disparate things kind of come together. So you take my military background. I've deployed. I've spent many a months in far off lands. Lots of all expense paid trips to the desert, as I like to say. I have this military background, and I kind of come from a background in New York where you have to grind and you have to just always work hard to survive, just to survive, which is really key for being an entrepreneur, because every day is a challenge. You just don't wake up and say, all right, everything's going to be good. You have to wake up thinking, oh my gosh, this could be the last day. So you have to hustle. You have to always be perceiving what's going on around you. So you think about that context, and here I am in a discipline of heart and lung transplant. This is one of the businesses that came to fruition by making these connections. I had a very good indoctrination in the military and understood and appreciated how powerful working as a team was. We would deploy to austere places with very little equipment, with just a team, and had a lot of training, and we built camaraderie and trust. And from that, we were able to do incredible things with little resources, saving lives for, incredibly injured and massively traumatic injuries. But we were able to do that. And I know, from my experiences in the civilian sector, saying to myself, oh my gosh, some of these injuries wouldn't even survive in the best hospitals. How is it that we're able to do that in these austere places? Part of it was mission. Part of it was the team, whether it's camaraderie. It was all of these things kind of coming together. And then I recognized that there was a need. And in my particular niche practice of what was happening, what I noticed was I was absolutely drawn, attracted to, passionate, and still am about heart and lung transplant. And as I started to work in these different facilities here in this DC, Maryland, Virginia area, I started to recognize that we were missing out on opportunities to get precious organs, hearts and lungs, that were offered to recipients, mostly because there was a logistic issue. There wasn't an available team, right? And I started to, volunteer to go out and do that. And then I started to realize if I could work with the same people over and over, I would get very efficient at it. I would get very good at it. And that just created this exploding demand. And what I realized is, as I worked with these different centers over the years, their numbers of the transplants that they were doing were going up. And it was because they were able to always go look at an offer. Whereas before, if the patient was relatively stable, I mean, the recipient patient waiting on the list, and they were home doing okay, but otherwise still in desperate need of an organ, and one came available and no one was available to go take a look and go recover that organ, they would just pass on it and say, all right, we'll take another look at it. And you imagine that happens a couple times a year. Those are opportunities for people to have their lives completely transformed and saved in many ways. And that to me was starting to make these connections. So I took my military background, sort of like this special ops kind of concept of like coming out of, a team background, going into a very austere, very chaotic situation, which is often the case when you're going to recover organs, because you're going to foreign hospitals, you're going to places and working with teams you've never worked with before, never been or visited, using equipment that's not really your own, but you have to adapt. I learned that from the military as well. You have to adapt and overcome, adapt and overcome. And doing that over and over and over, we really developed a system and a process that became really instrumental to laying the foundation for building a practice that we could scale. And then I recruited a number of surgeons, really kind of indoctrinated that training and that esprit de corps of the team. And that was the genesis of Star Teams. And it became, very popular. And I was fortunate that, in some ways, it became something that was truly valuable, not only for the centers that I started to work with and partner with, but it became something that was recognized as great value to a device company that sought us out for acquisition.
Yeah. So something I was thinking about as you were saying that is, like, I imagine when you are in that surgical situation in the military, everybody is like taking orders, giving order, reacting fast, taking nothing personally, like enabling whatever they can, right? Like, you're scrappy. So yeah. What did you maybe have to like learn or unlearn as you were building a business versus treating a patient? How did your leadership change as you found yourself in, like, oh, I actually need to care about like culture and morale and, deadlines in like a totally different way than you might have had to in the past?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. And it's a very good observation, because there are many differences between the civilian sector, obviously, and the military. Obviously we all have rank in the military. So the general comes or the admiral comes and comes like, hey, you got to go do something. For the most part, people are just going to do it, right? Because you just have to. But the very good leaders, I will tell you, don't necessarily use their rank. They use the gravitas of their communication, their care for the people that they're leading, and they become these servant leaders that you'll go take a hill for them. They tell you to jump off the cliff, you'll go do it. Not because they're the general or they're the admiral, but you do it because you respect them, because they model a kind of behavior that you want to emulate. So in some ways, I did learn that in the military, you could just use rank, you could just use authority, and you could get things done. But if you wanted to transform the enterprise, if you wanted to be successful in not only this one mission or this one task, but you wanted to elevate your entire team, your entire group, and you wanted to impact the actual mission in a positive way, you really had to get people to buy into what it is that you were trying to convey. And what that engendered for me, and what I carried forward into the civilian sector, is mission, very important. So when I conveyed to our teams and my colleagues that were working, side by side with me, going out, to recover the organs in particular, it wasn't that we were just going to recover organs. That was the task. That was the sort of, work that we were doing. But what I tried to convey to everyone was what we were doing was we were saving lives. We had this mission of touching 1 billion hearts. Now think about that. You're just a doctor, you're a surgeon. Yeah, you're doing incredible life-saving work, and you're doing highly technical, very demanding things, and that's great. It's rewarding. But think about it. If you can get people on the team to really believe that you're touching 1 billion hearts with the work that you do, whether you're the surgeon or you're the technician that's helping, or you're the person that's the coordinator, navigating and being air traffic control for all of our assets as we, navigate different, airports and hospitals and different clients that we have to service. And that every part of that work that you're doing across that entire value chain is to save not only lives, but to touch 1 billion hearts. Now you have someone that's coming to work every day, not to just answer phone calls and say, okay, well, this team go here, that team go there. Now you have someone that's not only just carrying equipment and bringing it along to be there when the surgeon asks for supplies. Now you're asking that surgeon not only to just go and recover and do the technical thing, but now you have this whole team that's saying, every day I come to work and everything that I do from picking up the phone to carrying the supplies to moving this box and moving that to doing this work is saving lives, but it's also touching 1 billion hearts. And that is where you have real power for transformation happen. If you think of, in my opinion, and I read a lot about entrepreneurs and leaders that have really built incredible empires and organizations, they really get the buy-in of that core group of people when they first build that foundational team of bringing value to whatever the discipline or sector is. So those are the things that I think I transferred. So I learned and unlearned different things at the appropriate times, but it was really a melding and an amalgamation of everything I learned in the military, the team concept of what I experienced firsthand as a surgeon in the military, but also as a surgeon in cardiac surgery rooms, because we have to have a team. It's not just the surgeon that makes the case successful. We have to have an anesthesiologist that's on the same page. We have to have the scrub tech. We have to have the circulating nurse. We have to have the perfusionist. All of us kind of working in this concert of understanding what each other is trying to do, using and emphasizing and leveraging, all of this to kind of bring together this great team to do something incredible.
Yeah. And it's really, I really loved what you said about the team. Like it's so easy to think of a team as everyone in the OR, but it's harder to think about a team in business when you have people who work in different locations and different steps of the funnel. And, that person who's actually maybe procuring the heart versus the person who there's so many pieces. And so to think about it like a team is such a great way to orient everybody towards that mission, like you said.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I really want to hear a story about is like a challenge that you guys faced. Like it really, like all of these things we've been talking about, are great and huge successes and huge wins, not even just for you and your team, but for the general population.
Right.
and our access to, organs.
Right.
But I'd love to hear about something that was a challenge for you guys, whether it was timing or people or process or funding or, whatever it was.
Yeah, all of the above have been challenges for sure. You choose which one, I can give you one. I will tell you, though, something that I think will be germane to this audience, and you touched on it a little bit, is when you start to grow, I think that's when you really have some challenges. And I think there's a lot of work that's, put into and a lot of emphasis placed on, the sort of storybook entrepreneur. They grind it out. He or she works hard. They build this team and they get this product, they get this service going, they bring it to market and they start doing well. And there is a lot to learn in that process. I don't want to minimize or diminish that in any way. But then you take it to the next level, that next chapter, when you start to grow. That's when you can start having a lot of this fragmentation. To your point, how do you scale that message of you're part of this mission when you have to hire 100 surgeons or you have to have, 1,000 people answering the phone that are not all located under the same roof? You might have people in, far off states. You may have people in different time zones. And now you have to communicate this sort of shared vision with a whole disparate group of individuals that, they're coming in way late into the game. They weren't there at the beginning. They may not really have the buy-in that maybe your core people have. And that's a challenge because, we struggled with that. And quite frankly, it was one of the reasons why I departed from the organization. And this is also not an uncommon thing. Lots of founders, and I learned it the hard way. I thought I was unique. I was like, why is this happening to me? And it was because there weren't shared visions anymore. Because when you start growing and scaling, and particularly when you get acquired, they usually have a different agenda than what you think your agenda was in the beginning. And I absolutely would not trade what happened at all, but it was all a learning experience for me. And I realized that when you start to scale and you start to grow, there becomes a different and sometimes often competing agenda from what the founders and the founding group of people had, as opposed to the acquirer and those that are kind of now brought in to scale the enterprise. Because at that point, unfortunately, the focus now becomes more about making money and bringing shareholder value to people that had a stake in the acquisition. And I completely get that. That's what business is all about. But that scaling and that growth, you can lose something. in that process. And you may make a lot of money, particularly in the short run, but whether or not that is a sustainable thing, I think sometimes could be, not necessarily the thing that gets achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. What is there anything else you would say that you learned about the acquisition process that maybe you would advise, current founders maybe looking to go down that path, whether it be positive or negative?
Oh yeah, 100%. I have an MBA, and I teach at the business school now. I've been adjunct faculty teaching, and I tell my business school students, they said, it's great that you're getting an MBA, but nothing will prepare you or teach you about business than going through an acquisition. Because when you start going through due diligence and really looking at your business from the outside, as people do, it's worse than a colonoscopy. It's really an invasive ordeal. No, I mean, it sounds funny, but it's not. And anybody that's gone through it, they can understand and appreciate what I'm saying. And what it does is it exposes your weaknesses. It also illuminates your strengths. And so my advice would be, first of all, be really, really thoughtful about what it is that you're trying to achieve in an acquisition or in a liquidation. Whether you're acquiring another company or someone's trying to acquire you. I think everyone that starts a business, I think the good businesses are started because they're trying to solve a problem. Eventually, I think it becomes very obvious and apparent that there needs to be an endpoint, an exit. Are you building it for the next generation of your family, and they're going to carry on the legacy? Are you going to sell it and then go and retire, or are you going to try and build sustain this forever? Now, nothing lasts forever. We just talked about that in the very beginning. So I think there needs to be a plan. Maybe not at the outset. At the outset, you just need to build a business and get the enterprise going. But I think being thoughtful about what it is you're trying to achieve in the exit is really important, because if you want to have, I think, peace of mind after that process, and you come to terms with, this is going to be something I'm going to walk away from, that's actually a really good thing to go and process in your mind. But if you think you're going to sell it, and then you think you have a lot, of input, depending on how things are structured, that may or may not work out the way the way you plan. I learned that a bit the hard way. But again, I don't regret anything that happened. I think it was all a learning experience, and it's engendered and given me a lot of experience to approach my new enterprises, building another service line in that same kind of guise and construct, but also doing things in AI, because I had this great opportunity to be exposed to, a decade worth of actual work in this place of clinical informatics and using and leveraging AI at a time before ChatGPT was at zeitgeist, before people were talking about AI the way they were then. And I realized, hey, I had all of this, all this great experience that I learned from building a business. Now I can take that into a completely different domain. And that could be another way that entrepreneurs look at their next chapter. And being a serial entrepreneur, and I think that's a great thing, because you can now make an impact in an entirely different sector using those skills that are very transferable, because you have to deal with people, you have to deal with processes, and you're going to have a lot of problems. And what I think it equips you with, being an entrepreneur, that is this innate sense of problem solving. Like every day you have to wake up and solve problems. Like if you don't like problems, you should not go into business for yourself. You should just go into a job where someone tells you this is what you got to do every day and just deal with it. Because if you don't like problems, then you're not going to like being an entrepreneur. You're not going to like being, a business owner, because you have to anticipate problems. You have to welcome problems. You have to embrace problems. You have to hug them every day. Like, I love this problem. Let me figure out how I'm going to fix it. And in fixing it, it gets you ready for the next problem and the next one and the next one. And then you start, I think, really understanding and realizing, hey, these problems are not problems at all. They may seem terrible in the short term, but they actually become the catapult for lifting the enterprise and building the company and bridging, where you are now to where you want to go and where you're going to go in the future as you solve them. and you negotiate each one.
I mean, it's really interesting to think about each problem as a bridge and an opportunity rather than a setback. And I feel like I've heard that in the way that you've spoken about all your experiences, like really focusing on the positive, not spin, because it really is positive. Like you got where you were because you solved all those problems. Like I think it's a great way to look. Okay, so last question is like, what is next for you? Like, what are you excited about in AI and healthcare, and what do you see as kind of the future in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, well, I am super excited about this because, unlike the work that I did in transplant, it was very niche. It was very, very focused. I'm not minimizing what we were doing at all. Incredible work, but it was impacting a very small group of individuals. Those that were waiting on transplants, those that had transplants, and I think what I'm excited about with my work in AI, and I should preface this by saying, for the last 5 years of my military career, I was leading the Warfighter Health Mission in the Pentagon at the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, which then became the Chief Digital and AI Office. And that's what my book is about. I wrote about my experience and how I use that stories and those use cases to sort of lay out a framework for what I believe is necessary for implementing AI into healthcare now, that has wide applicability, not only in the military, but also the civilian sector. So what I'm excited about, quite frankly, to answer the question succinctly, is impact. AI, in my opinion, has tremendous potential to make a huge impact. It can solve a lot of the problems that I've experienced and witnessed over, the decades of my practice as a healthcare provider, as a surgeon, as a physician, as a patient, as a family member of patients. I see so many problems that I think AI can help assist in solving those problems. And, I'll just give you an example. One of the things that I think is a complete paradigm change, and this is what excites me about the future, to answer that part of your question, is that, if you think about the thousands or hundreds of years that, a couple thousand and a few hundred years of what we call modern healthcare, from the time of Hippocrates to the present, there was always this doctor-patient relationship where there was this asymmetry of information. And what I mean by that is you had to spend all these years as an apprentice or as some healer to learn about how to take care of people. And when people got sick, they went to these healers to get information. That was from the time of Hippocrates to the current time. Well, now there's this asymmetric information difference. And what I mean by that is with chat, with the ability to access all of the documented literature in healthcare by the layperson, and the ability for them to synthesize and use their own information and juxtapose that with the available information of all of modern medicine's discoveries and advances in innovation. Now you as a patient can come empowered to that exchange with the doctor with more information than they will ever have on you. I have this watch on, one of the things that I was successful in doing the last couple of years is finishing my first Ironman. Now I've done 2 of them and I've done half Ironman. So I'm like a seasoned Ironman. I'm working on the World Championship qualification. And I can tell you, if it wasn't for the data that I was getting on a continuous basis, because I've tried this before and I failed miserably. And I had to realize that I had to synthesize a lot of things. It wasn't just how much I ran or how much I lifted or how much I cycled. Like that wasn't, it was so much more I had to put together. I had to put together nutrition. I had to put together rest and recovery. Rest and recovery, I had no idea that was even a factor. But then I started to look at the numbers and I started to see, hey, if I didn't sleep well this day, if I didn't eat this amount of calories and that much macros, my workout would suck the next day. And that would cascade into an entirely, unfulfilling training regimen and paradigm. But once I started to dial all those in with the help of a coach, with assistance, and with insights from all of these data points, I was able to do something that I couldn't do years ago. It was impossible. So in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, what if you have hypertension? You have diabetes, continuous glucose monitoring. You have all of the information now to do what could never be done before. Because I would argue that what you can do now as a patient, empowered with information, with all of these tools available to you through AI and sensors and the synthesis of all this information, is you can be your best health advocate in a way that will far surpass the best doctor visit that you have twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that that visit can engender and empower you the way that you can be empowered on a daily, hourly, weekly, monthly basis, day in, day out, knowing and fine-tuning what things in your environment, what things in your diet, what things in your activity, what things in your stress and hormone levels dictate how you feel. And better yet, what things can make you feel better. So I think we're embarking on a very exciting time. And I think AI is going to empower patients in a way that gives them this asymmetric power dynamic. It sort of flips the script now. And I think what people that are in healthcare need to realize is there's no longer going to be this pontiff where I tell you what to do and you just go do it. It has to be more of a partnership. And of course, that's going to take some time for the myriad cultures to sort of get their hands and wrap their hands around that concept. But it's going to happen one way or the other. And you're starting to see it. You're starting to see innovators take what used to be conducted just in this traditional healthcare, apparatus and organization outside of that whole paradigm. You can go to Hims and Hers, for example, use that. There's a whole bunch of Super Bowl commercials about them. Mm-hmm. That's completely outside of healthcare. I mean, the traditional healthcare, but it is healthcare. And they've found a way for them to reach a niche market that's interested in taking care of themselves, but they don't want to deal with the whole apparatus of this construct that was largely a relic of post-World War II, enterprise. So I think it's an exciting time. I think there's going to be lots of opportunities, and I think ultimately the patients will benefit, ideally.
Yeah, I've been following like the personalized medicine initiative since college, and I'm so excited for preventative, personalized, all those words of healthcare that could start when you're 18 and you consent into the system. That can drive your health positively, like for the rest of your life. And I think AI totally enables that. So Dr. Tetteh, it was so awesome to talk to you. I know I learned a lot about healthcare and the military and all of that. And thank you so much for, all that you've done.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation to visit with you and your audience. I really appreciate it.